You're gonna get tired, work's not gonna get done. So in the same breath, he's saying, God, give me the strength, keep me going, keep me working.
Mm.
I think I read this morning, my devotions, that where it says, don't weary of doing good. But most of us do because it's hard work. So, need that strength in my hands and don't let me quit doing good.
The other question too, even with that, but now God strengthen my hands. Was he? When do we know when this was written? Was this like, was he jotting stuff down during, like?
Is this his diary? Is that what you mean?
Well, more or less. Like, is
Yeah.
he making notes of what's taking place? So
Well,
is this in the evening when he's sitting under candlelight and he's just like contemplating what took place through the day, and it is his little prayer of like, you know, but now God strengthen my hands, like prepare, or maybe it's the next morning and he's gotten up, you know, however you want to look at that, like, could be.
Yeah. I wouldn't start a church on it, but it's definitely a human. I was thinking, and it would be the same parallel, the idea of as he's writing these responses, right? I mean, you know, the idea of maybe a little bit of that, that's being a little silly, but I mean, his response is
It's
work, leading, like the leadership side of things.
interesting too, if you think about verse 9, that they wanted that fear, the leaders in the, like Sanballat and Tobiah, well, and just in general, they knew that they had a better chance of crippling their enemy through fear, or fear-mongering or whatever, than they're literally building a wall for protection of war or evasion, and like the sword is less scary than fear.
Just
Like, they could cripple the army or the people through fear easier, or like they felt that way, like, oh, if we cripple them by fear, we can get control of them or overtake them, versus, hey, why don't we just use brute force and try to kill them, like.
because people do stupid things when they're afraid.
But yeah, so it's like, oh, they wanted to frighten us thinking that their hands will drop from the work, versus just like threatening.
Like that was easier than just going and trying to. Yeah, that's true.
Maybe a two
They
less
do the
bloodshed,
work for
but
you, eh?
yeah.
And you make them scared.
I was talking with Malcolm this morning. Now, the topic was giving, but the idea of knowing what's in your heart versus knowing what holds your heart, right? Like, I mean, it's one thing to say that you give and what have you. It's another thing to actually, and then discover, oh, I'm attached to that, right? Or I am fearful of the future, right? Or I am, you know, like it's a completely, it's a human thing. It's part of, I'm sure, part of our fallen nature in there, but it's one thing to believe it in your heart. It's another thing to find out what's holding your heart. And I mean, even this fear, like you're saying, I mean, it's one, like they're building with the spears and we could die at any moment there, but it's another thing to.
Yeah, always in there. What was it, verse or chapter 3? They said they like had the sword on them while they worked. Like,
So now they're
literally carrying a sword while they're building the wall. But then it's like, oh, we could break them with fear.
Yeah, I mean, the Persians, they have these rebellion, these rumors. I mean, the king of Persia, I mean, if he gets wind of this, right, he's going to come in there. I mean, then all of a sudden we find that fear. And I think we could relate with it in many ways. I'm not looking forward to gas prices going back up to $2 a liter again. You know what I mean? Like, that could be a.
As long as the border stays open, we'll be okay. Just keep telling me.
Don't hold your breath.
Yeah.
All right, well, wait. So then we have verse 10, and I think we mind that a little bit afterward. So I mean, he kind of plugging into Edward's observations. I mean, these are quiet moments in his own heart, right? And his observations of what's going on. So you have a leader's wisdom. I know that they're trying to instill fear. He sent his response. He's asked God to strengthen his hands for what needs to be done yet. Oh, there's so many. I'm just even thinking as a leader, when you know your people are scared, right? I mean, there's a lot of different thoughts that go through. I mean, you'd have shepherding, but you'd also have how do I keep momentum? Right? How do I channel that fear and strengthen them? And perhaps that's part of that strengthening the hands to lead, like a leading picture there too.
I was just thinking, people say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I was like, this is another one that people would love to just rip right out of the context and put on mugs and stuff. Now therefore, oh God, strengthen my hands.
For bakers making
I mean,
bread.
But in some respects,
it's
that's
good.
Ephesians 3:16.
Yeah, no, it's
That you pray to
good,
God
you
with
strengthen your hands,
strengthening
but
hands,
it's
yeah.
to strengthen your hands to do what God has directed you to do.
Well, yeah.
Not just what I want to do and God's going to give me the strength to do it. That's all I mean. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But that doesn't mean all things I want to do. It's all things, well, it's actually talking about knowing how to be content with little or much. But
Right.
I just think that's the same thing here.
Mm. Oh, there's so, and we're just basically taking the first pass here, right? There's so many different things. The Shemaiah, the son of Leah, the son of Mehetabel, who was a secret informer, who was shut up. And he said, let us meet together in the house of God, within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. Indeed, at night they will come to kill you. Great. His day just got better. Anybody ever been on pressure that never let up? Just one thing after another, and then you turn the corner and all of a sudden there's another fella going, hey, I got a message for you. Oh. You know, like, come on, Lord. 52 days. That's it. Yeah. And I said, should such a man as I flee? And who is there such as I who would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in.
Did everybody read the part where it said, well, not everybody has a study Bible, but it was against God's law to go up into the temple.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there must be a
So
specific...
so just asking him to go into the temple would have been a red flag, because if you go in there, you're breaking God's law.
I have that Nehemiah refused the invitation to take sanctuary in the temple since he was neither a Levite nor a priest.
Yeah, he wasn't supposed to be in there at all.
Now, we'll remember, at least I remember on 2 occasions where kings or even Joab, whenever political tension and they were in the bad books, they'd run in and take hold of the altar. Right? That was like a response when like last resort for his life kind of thing. So, I mean, very, very big connection here too. Perhaps this Shemaiah is like, just give up. Right, go in, plead for your life.
I'm just curious why he went to the house of this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't say, but
Maybe that's why he needed his hand strengthened. Maybe he's gonna go knock him out.
He'd do it too. Read a few more chapters later.
Yeah. I wanna get there, we gotta speed up here. So what about even verse 12? Now, I know languages, but I mean, the first word of verse 12 is what?
then I perceived.
Then, right? So I mean, he acts, as a believer, as someone who's trusting God, as a leader, and then he perceives that God had not sent him at all. So I mean, this is all real-time message, response, and then God makes him aware that he had not sent him at all, but that he pronounced this prophecy against me. Imagine being a leader and be like, okay, God's told me this about you. Basically, they're just roll over and die. Just go in and... Because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. Now he's got nobody really to trust. Like I said, nobody, but can't trust the close ones. For this reason, he was hired, that I should be afraid and act that way. That way would be running into the temple and sin. That sin must have something to do with perhaps that taking hold of the altar or not trusting God in that. So that they might have cause for an evil report, that they might reproach me.
So if you had listened and gone into the temple, they would have went back and says,
See, he
He just
doesn't
broke the
follow
law.
law.
yeah, he's gone to the temple, he's sinned.
And who would they be defacing him in front of?
His people.
His people, the Jewish people, right? He'd be undermining his ability to lead, that God's leading him, right? The spiritual aspects of it. And there's so many different political tactics here, isn't there?
They give them a little bit of credibility in their charges against him. See, he is guilty. Now he's gonna plead at the altar, or plead in the temple.
Yep.
Obviously, he thinks there's something wrong because he's gone into the temple. Interesting.
Yeah, only the guilty run, they say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So then verse 14, I kind of want to get to who this Tobiah fellow is, because there's a lot of, unrest. Nehemiah probably at the end probably just wished that he just removed a lot of these different characters, right? But 14, my God, remember Tobiah and Sanballat according to these works, and the prophetess Noadiah, or D, I guess, and the rest of the prophets who would have made me afraid. What's he saying there? Is that a good God, please remember them?
Deal with them.
That's remember them for
Vengeance is
judgment.
mine, saith the Lord, I will repay.
It's a dealing, yeah. There'd be something probably to do with Daniel 12 and the resurrection, right? The righteous to the light and illumination, and the wicked to darkness.
Not really prophets then, are they? Well, at least,
No,
they prophesied at some point, but they kind of
False
lose their
prophets.
position when they.
obviously Noadiah, to be
Which is
called a
really-
prophetess, it would have had at least one speaking for God, right? But do preachers go rogue and be used of Satan?
Well, that's why, that's even how, when Ruth asked the question, I was already kind of trying to do some searching, couldn't find anything for cross-references or anything, but verse 10, when he says, now I went into the house of Shemaiah, there's nothing saying why, but, he was already saying no to Sanballat and Tobiah and these people who clearly were up to no good. So you would assume that if they sent for, if Shemaiah was connected to them, you wouldn't assume that he would have gone into this place like he might have been going because Shemaiah was in charge of the south gate or or whatever, went to
Yeah, he
speak to
didn't
or
know at
whatever.
the start that he was hired.
Yeah, and so then to look at down at the prophetess Noadiah and then the prophets, and these were also his people, but like you said, rogue. These were Jewish people.
There's an interesting cross-reference to Ezekiel 13, where 17 to 23 talks about false prophetesses, specifically. And verse 22 says, because with lies you've made the heart of the righteous sad, whom I have not made sad, and you have strengthened the hands of the wicked, so that he does not turn from his wicked way to save his life.
To say it
By your lying to my people, yeah.
There's always facing the wrath of God. There's always people that seem to step in and go, that ain't gonna happen, right? It's not coming. We're not that bad. God's not that angry,
yeah.
right? Well,
Well, the reference for that is Romans 12:19. I went and looked for it. The vengeance is mine, I will repay.
yeah. Yeah, so and we don't often, I think we're careful with it. We've discussed it, but again, the idea of praying that God would deal with those that are.
I was thinking about that and looking at it, and especially if he's talking of if besides Tobiah and Sanballat, talking about the prophetess and the prophets, boy, you would want to be he doesn't make specific claims of what they've done wrong. He just according to what they
their
did.
words,
So
yeah.
it's okay, whatever wrongs they've done, he's not pointing it out in that statement. But boy, you would want to either just keep your mouth shut and not pray anything against somebody, or pray very like specifically of like, okay, Lord, I feel like there's something done wrong here, like I'll let you deal with it. But like us being careful not to be like, judge them, Lord. Like,
Yeah, but
you know what I mean?
but at the
Like,
same
There are
time,
prayers like that, though.
I do
Right,
think that we
precatory.
shouldn't be so scared to draw lines.
yes, yeah, but just
Now,
like,
I do know that, like, we pray regularly that Justin Trudeau would get saved, right, and his family and whatnot. I mean, that's very important. At the same time, I could, in righteous indignation, pray that God would deal with him on some of these things that him and his government introduces, right?
God did that to Nebuchadnezzar, he certainly dealt with him.
Well, and that's like even, I just even Acts chapter 1 where Peter starts quoting scripture, because Judas had just killed himself, right? And he quotes from Psalm 69, which is a prayer of indignation. It's an imprecatory prayer, right? He would have been really upset with what Judas did, right? And he's plugging that in, saying like David was writing it. Same thing, he'd been betrayed, so.
And I think that's a fairly safe prayer to make when you see any kind of injustice or wrong done, because you're not trying to do it yourself. You're basically saying, I'm giving this to you. I think
according to your
something
will.
greatly has been misdone here, but I have no way of correcting it, which is probably better, because, you know. And then,
My
and you're
version's
like,
not good.
you're humble, saying, Lord, like, if something's gonna be done, you're gonna have to do it.
Yeah, one of my well-rehearsed prayers as a young man in ministry was, God, you please deal with it. You know, like just, I don't know how, I don't want to, I don't think it'll help these matters, like, Lord, you deal with it that's going on. All right, so let's finish the chapter, not to ramrod this, because I want to just look at this Tobiah fella, because I mean, for 52 days, it seems like Nehemiah, 52 days, it's almost 2 months. Like you got project, you got job, you got people on board, you got fearful people, you got political pressure, you got internal pressure, you've got your own fears, you got your own close acquaintances, I mean, false prophets, you got satanic, I mean, if they're speaking false prophecy, Satan's at work, you got a lot of things on this guy's plate, right? So verse 15, should we just start over?
Oh, was that me?
Was that you?
I think so.
Yes.
So the wall was finished on the 25th day of Elul in 52 days.
52 days.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, concerned they didn't have like
The equipment that we have
power
now.
tools.
And they were one-handed. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I'm a good
Wow.
man, but I need both of them.
Wow. Scoop
Yeah.
of sand, scoop of sand.
Mm-mm-mm.
And it happened when all our enemies heard of it, and all the nations around us saw these things. They were very disheartened in their own eyes, for they had perceived that this work was done by our God.
Also in those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and the letters of Tobiah came to them.
For many in Judah were pledged to him. So I mean, even his own leadership. And because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Erah, and his son Jehohanan had married the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah.
So they reported his good deeds before me and uttered my words to him. And Tobiah sent letters to put me in fear.
Doesn't sound like he has a very good starting lineup here, does it? Okay, so we'll probably maybe come back to this, but I'm really feeling for Nehemiah right now. Work's done. You think they'll be ready to party, right? Celebrate. Now I know some of that comes here in a bit, but I think the treachery and what's underneath the surface continues to come out, right? I don't think this just all of a sudden, these letters just didn't all of a sudden start because the project's done. Now, you've got a history, you've got these connections, you got, allegiances, you've got all this different stuff for this poor guy. So we got 2 minutes, let's just go to the end of the book. We'll skip, this is my personality, we'll just fast forward to the end of the movie. And then consider they're at watch.
Spoiler alert.
Oh, you don't have to read chapter 7.
Oh no, we'll come back to that. Well, we're gonna draw
We're not getting out of
straws.
that one.
We're gonna draw straws. We'll have it all
I'll do
mapped
it.
out. All right, so chapter 13. And I'm not sure how far. I think we'll just read till we kind of concur from verse 4 down, just to see where this narrative ends with Tobiah. So we got Judah leaders writing, we got this kind of back and forth going on. I think Edward, you're starting verse 4, chapter 13?
Sure. Now before this, Elisha, the priest who was appointed over the chambers of the house of our God, and who was related to Tobiah,
He had prepared for him a large room, where previously they had stored the grain offerings, the frankincense, the articles, the tithes of grain, the new wine and oil, which were commanded to be given to the Levites and singers and gatekeepers, and the offerings for the priests.
But during all this, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes,
Artaxerxes.
king of Babylon, I had returned to the king. Then after certain days, I obtained leave from the king.
And I came to Jerusalem and discovered the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah in preparing a room for him in the courts of the house of God.
And it grieved me bitterly. Therefore I threw all the household goods of Tobiah out of the room.
So they provide a room in the house of God for this Tobiah that we're reading about, that's stirring up the leaders of Judah.
And he's not even a Levite.
Yeah, and there's a conspiracy in the midst of it. I don't remember, did Nehemiah go back for 10 years? I think it's a length of time. I don't remember exactly, or maybe it doesn't. I'll have to, I know he goes back, or maybe it's after 10 years he goes back. Anyway, it's quite a length of time, I will post on. But he comes back and he finds like everything he worked for, everything he strove for, thinking of our conversation after church, everything that they tried to implement and structure and lead the people to, and everything seems to be on the head. Okay, we'll keep going?
Then I commanded them to cleanse the rooms, and I brought back into them the articles of the house of God, with the grain offering and the frankincense.
I also realized that the portions for the Levites had not been given to them. For each of the Levites and the singers did the work had gone back to his field.
So I contended with the rulers and said, why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place.
Then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn, and the new wine, the oil, unto the treasuries.
and I appointed as treasurers over the storehouses Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and Pedaiah of the Levites, and as their assistant Hanan the son of Zakur, son of Mattaniah, for they were considered reliable, and their duty was to distribute to their brothers.
Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and do not wipe out my good deeds that I have done for thee, for the house of my God, and for its services.
In those days I saw people in Judah treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves, and loading donkeys with wine, grapes, figs, and all kinds of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I warned them about the day on which they were selling provisions.
Men of Tyre dwelt there also, who brought in fish and all kinds of goods, and sold them on the Sabbath to the children of Judah, and in Jerusalem.
Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said to them, what evil thing is this that you do, by which you profane the Sabbath day?
Did not your fathers do thus, and did not our God bring all this disaster on us and on his city? Yet you bring added wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath.
So it was at the gates of Jerusalem, as it began to be dark before the Sabbath, that I commanded the gates to be shut, and charged they must not be opened till after the Sabbath. And I posted some of my servants at the gate, so that no burdens would be brought in on the Sabbath day.
Now the merchants and sellers of all kinds of wares lodged outside Jerusalem once or twice. This will be an interesting chapter to go through.
And I testified against them and said unto them, Why lodge ye about the wall? If ye do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath.
Then I commanded the Levites that they should purify themselves and come and guard the gates to keep the Sabbath day holy. Remember this also in my favor, O my God, and spare me according to the greatness of your steadfast love.
In those days, I also saw Jews who had married women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab.
And half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, and could not speak the language of Judah, but spoke according to the language of one or the other people.
Kind of like not being able to read your Bible.
So I contended with them, and cursed them, and struck some of them, and pulled out their hair, and made them swear by God, saying, You shall not give your daughters as wives to their sons, nor take their daughters for your sons or yourselves.
Did not Solomon king of Israel sin by these things? Yet among many nations there was no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, pagan women caused even him to sin.
Should we then hear of your doing all this great evil, trespassing against our God by marrying pagan women?
And one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest, was son-in-law of Sanballat, the Horonite. Therefore I drove him from me.
Cleaning house. Wonder if Nehemiah was tithing at this point. Remember them, oh my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites.
Thus cleansed I them from all strangers, and appointed the wards of the priests and the Levites, every one in his business.
And I provided for the wood offering at appointed times and for the first fruits. Remember me, O my God, for good. Oh, there's your answer on his tithing.
Yeah, cleansing it, setting it up right.
Yeah. As I couldn't help but think of Jesus flipping the temple tables when he got into the provision, the room that was for all the different provisions
Yeah.
and Levites and stuff, and then it says he was through all the household furniture to buy it out of the chamber.
Well, and when Jesus does that, he's quoting from Jeremiah 7. And if you go to Jeremiah 7, it's the same thing. He's standing in front of the temple, basically cleansing it, right? Like he's calling the people there out for what they're doing.
How many times do we read of the temple being cleansed through the Bible?
Several.
There's another study in itself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, like all the things that are happening in the churches nowadays, it's in some respects, it's nothing new under the sun. It's the same thing where we just constantly let the world in until we have to clean house in the church too.
Well, there is something to be said, and we're over time, but if there's no accountability, right? I mean, they're just complete freedom for anything that goes, right? So, so this source, explains Nehemiah's first term as so Nehemiah's first term as governor, and I'm reading that as in their hymn going, they built the wall, was 12 years, when you do the math through the years. And then he's recalled, but we don't know exactly, it could have been 6 months, it could have been a couple years, where he goes back to Persia, right? But it is a length enough time to clean out the storehouse, move Tobiah in, get a couple high priests married into that there and cause a big mess, which I don't think you need that much time to cause that, but we can have some of those thoughts afterwards. but I mean, do organizations and churches have Tobias in them? Right, and those that would come alongside and say, hey, I'm speaking for God here, I have some wisdom for you. Do we have to be careful? Certainly. I know when I first started out, I had quite a few people wanting to invest in me, and I, believe it or not, I do listen, but you start figuring out after a while, some of them aren't as close to walking in the Spirit as you think, right? Some of them have different motives, some of them emphasize programs, some of them have different directions. So I mean, we do have to be careful with that. Cool. I'm content. Yeah. No, again, we had a good meeting with our CVBS.